The 1993 Tar Heels are forever cemented in North Carolina and college basketball lore. And now Raycom Sports and ACC Network are bringing us a brand new way to relive the whole journey.
This is Tyler Hansbrough, and you're listening to Locked On Tar Heels.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, it's Saturday, January 10th, 2025. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade. You're joining me at the place to get your Tar Heels content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network out there. I want to thank you for making this your first listen or watch to get your Tar Heels content every single day. Special shout out to all our everydayers, all the members of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord, and of course, our insiders as well. This episode's brought to you by FanDuel. Before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday night from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. You guys, we have a special treat today, an interview with Ed Mabe. You might not know Ed's name, but he is the director and producer of a brand new documentary from Raycom Sports and the ACC Network called We're Number One, the 1993 North Carolina Tar Heels. It's going to be airing tonight, Saturday, on ACC Network, right after Carolina and Wake finishes. So actually probably more like 8:30 or something like that. But it's going to be such a great opportunity to relive Carolina's unforgettable 93 title run, which culminates obviously with that championship over Michigan and their Fab Five. Great interviews from George Lynch, Brian Reese, Derek Phelps, Donald Williams, and more. And how about this? Exclusive first-person footage from Eric Montross himself. Great stuff. So Ed is here with me today to talk about it, unpack it, share the journey. It's so much fun, a great interview. Let's dive right in. Man, it is a true joy to be joined on Locked On Tar Heels today by Ed Mabe, the director, the producer of ACC Network and Raycom Sports' brand new documentary, We're Number One, the 1993 North Carolina Tar Heels. Again, it will be airing tonight. It's slated for 8 p.m., but it's after the Carolina Wake game, so we know it's going to be like 8:30 or something like that by the time it's all said and done. But we record and we're bringing this to you on a Saturday before the game tip. So just a great full day of North Carolina Tar Heels basketball. Ed, I'm so grateful for your time. And I actually want to start by journeying down your personal life in interacting with this team and that landscape of college basketball. Because from my great LinkedIn research, you, sir, were just post-grad a couple years and getting ready to start grad school around the time that this national championship happened for the Tar Heels. So I just want to ask your memories of this team, of the landscape of college basketball.
Well, when I think of the landscape of college basketball in that era, again, I was between, like you said, undergrad and grad school, about to start grad school. When I think of the landscape of college basketball in that time period, I think of Duke. I'll be frankly honest with you. The show, this is a series we've done called We're Number One, and I had just done a show last year on the 91-92 Duke teams. And I got a real sense of the landscape of college basketball at that time. And that, like I say, was dominated by Duke with back-to-back championships with Leitner and Grant Hill and Bobby Hurley. So, I had a good idea of what that landscape was like at that time. And, it was, like I say, it was dominated by Duke, and Carolina was in a bit of a funk, you might say. Even though they'd made the Final Four in 1991, they still had not won a championship since 1982. Coach Smith had only won the one championship, and there were a lot of doubters at that time about his being able to win another championship, that he couldn't win the big game, essentially. So that was a big part of the landscape at that time. That was sort of the word on the street, as Pat Sullivan said, was that Coach Smith needed to do something to kind of enhance his legacy a little bit. And I don't think he looked at it that way, but certainly that's the way his team did. And they made a pact that year to win one for Coach Smith. And that was sort of the big goal for that season and that team.
Did you have any personal interactions either with the team directly or indirectly surrounding their championship run?
You mean back in 93?
Yes, sir.
No, not at all. The only interaction I did have was me and my friends went up to Franklin Street and watched the game in a bar that night. And then we went out and all got separated and ended up back home in Winston-Salem at 5:30 in the morning. But like I said, we had a great time that night. About a lot of things I probably don't remember too well, but I do remember the ride home and a lot of bonfires.
A lot of bonfires on Franklin Street.
A lot of bonfires.
That's so cool.
Remember couches coming out of dorm windows. It was just incredible. And it was like Mardi Gras. I'd been to Mardi Gras 2 years before. And I was like, this is insane.
Well, and ironically enough, the national championship happened down in Nollins. And so that's crazy. But what a cool full circle moment for you to have been on Franklin Street that night and then get to tell this tale of the team that led you to that moment, man. I think that's really neat, Ed. Let's get into the documentary. I had a chance to watch it. It is so well done. I love the conceit of it. And quite literally, Eric Montross, who is larger than life. Unfortunately, we know Eric, Big E, is no longer with us. But Ed, what is crazy to me is that his voice is the first voice you hear. His homemade first-person footage is the first footage you see. Why is that the direction you went?
Well, I had a whole completely different direction. I ended up getting that footage of Eric's sort of at the last quarter of the show, maybe the last 25%. And so when I got that, I had more of a traditional open that I'd cut for the show and was going to use that and was going in a completely different direction in a lot of ways. But then when I got that footage, it changed everything. And I always wanted Eric to have a voice in the show, but I wasn't certain because we didn't really have a great comprehensive sit-down interview with him or anything. So I needed something to kind of bring that to the forefront. And as soon as I got that footage and started scanning through it, and it's 20 minutes of just incredible personal stuff too, just beautiful interaction with him, his team, his friends, his family, all the fans. So like I say, when I got that footage, I knew that the direction of the show had to change and that you play to your strengths, as I like to say a lot of times. What's your best stuff? And let's make sure we play to our strength. And that was, like I say, it was an incredible gift that Laura Montross allowed us to use that footage. And I can't thank her enough. And the trust that she placed in us as well, because, they're very, concerned about how Eric's portrayed. You can imagine.
Sure.
And she told me when she gave me the footage, she goes, I need to see this before you air it. So she kind of had a first look and she was very happy and pleased with the way everything was portrayed regarding Eric.
I've got to ask, how did you even realize that this footage existed? How did that come to you?
Well, as I was doing initial research for the show, I was looking at old footage that we have here at Raycom Sports of the team arriving back at the Dean Dome the morning I guess it was afternoon after the championship game the next day. And as I was looking through footage and it's, the place is packed, everyone's celebrating and the team's getting off the bus and, the really great footage on our part as well. But as one thing that I noticed is when Eric walked out onto the stage, he was holding a little handy cam that were very popular back in the early 90s in his palm. And he was just, shooting everything in sight, so to speak. And I thought immediately, wow, that is an incredible opportunity. I wonder if that footage still exists. And then sure enough, I went through several months of her trying to find it. And eventually it kind of fell into my lap. And it was just, like I say, it was sort of like the holy grail of the project. Another little side story of interest regarding that same thing is there's one of the other players on the team, Matt Winstrom, one of the centers. He also had a handy cam. There's a couple at the very beginning, you see him sort of shooting one another and, Eric and Matt. Well, when I asked Matt about it, he's like, oh yeah, that footage it's incredible. He says he told me that he had shot video of the locker room pregame speech by Dean Smith. And it was on this little handy cam that he had. Yeah. Oh, I was like, oh my God, because I don't think Dean's ever allowed anyone in the locker room, certainly halftime, no way, any of that stuff. So when he told me that, I was like, holy crap, are you kidding me? And I immediately thought, where's it at, Matt? Turns out Matt tells me this story that some 20 plus years ago, someone broke into his home, stole a bunch of things at random. And one of the things that were stolen at random was the footage from that Dean Smith and, Michigan game, post game. And I was like, again, he was there with the video camera, just like Eric was. So I know he shot some really cool stuff too, but I don't know. Again, it's like one of those things. It all kind of points back to Eric somehow. It always gets back to Eric. He was really the heartbeat of that team, and it didn't really have a champion. It didn't really have a superstar on that team. But I think when you think about that team, I know I did. I thought of Eric. Excuse me. I thought of Eric immediately. He was the first person that I thought of when I thought of that team. And again, I lived through that era. but there's no true superstar. You got Donald, who played like a superstar. You got George Lynch. You've got some fantastic players, Phelps, Reese, Pat Sullivan. But, it was all about that cohesion that they had. And, that was just sort of the strength of the team. Yeah. And I think them not having a superstar made them more reliant on one another as a group. If you have that Michael Jordan that you're going to toss the ball to with 10 seconds to go, it's always going to Mike. Everybody knows that. But with this team, you never really knew who was going to get the ball at go time, or, everyone had a place on this team. And I think they really embodied Dean Smith's style of coaching and philosophy of coaching better than any team that he ever had. I know that 82 team is vastly probably more talented on paper, but nonetheless, this team could hang with anybody. And remember, you have to remember too how great the ACC was in that era. I mean, Duke had just won back-to-back titles, and then Carolina had made the Final Four in '91, and then Carolina won the championship in '93. So that was 3 national titles in 3 years for the ACC. So it was a great time for the ACC, and it was just a great time for Carolina basketball as well.
To your point about not having a superstar, I think exactly what you said is right. The team was the superstar rather than an individual, with Eric as the heart of the team. And Ed, what I think you bring to light so beautifully in the documentary is that Eric was the heart of the team, and he becomes the heart of this project that you've done, man. And I think that's part of what makes it so very well done. So great job there. Also, that footage from Wenstrom, oh my goodness, that's off with the JFK footage, the Zapruder film somewhere, man. We got to go find this thing. And
it's in the landfill somewhere out there, man. Nobody even knows if someone even has it.
It's priceless.
It's like I didn't even really want to know that it existed. It disappointed me so much.
Oh, sleepless nights, I'm sure. Last question before we start to move into talking about that loaded ACC and the run of this season. The majority of the documentary takes place at Top of the Hill, right there on Franklin Street, a little roundtable discussion with a lot of figures from that 92-93 championship team for North Carolina. Why was that the appropriate setting to have that meeting of the minds?
Well, again, it's one of those things that sort of fell into place. That Eric Montross's Father's Day camp usually was on the weekend. This year, it actually happened early in the week. And right. So all those guys were in town on like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I think the camp was. And it just so happened that Top of the Hill was closed on a Tuesday. They're always closed on Tuesday, right? So it fell right into my lap again. I called up the manager, they were incredibly helpful, and said, please come and do it here. We'd love to have you here. And it, like I say, it just fell into our lap, the place being closed. We had complete run of the place. We ordered barbecue and all sat around, ate barbecue before the shooting of the thing. So it was a real camaraderie thing, even with our crew, and everyone was really excited, because a lot of people that I work with are also Carolina fans, as you can imagine. So sure. Again, Top of the Hill, it seemed to have, again, sort of a spiritual thing too. I don't think they were open in '93. I think they opened more in the later '90s, but nonetheless, I mean, what a perfect spot. And we shot some great scenic stuff with them at sunset, on Franklin Street in the background. So, it was, again, just a blessed thing that the way things all kind of came together with this show. And Top of the Hill, I'm tipping my hat to Top of the Hill, because those guys were fantastic there. And please go there anytime.
Absolutely, man. It came together so well. Well, current assistant Pat Sullivan, obviously part of that team, he let us know that the Carolina Fab Five was the Fab Five before the Michigan Fab Five. How did an early season encounter with that Michigan team help set the stage for the eventual national championship? We're going to journey through this championship season coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about Rougiet, look, let's talk about something that most men don't bring up, but they absolutely should. Stress from work, from life, from money, it doesn't just switch off at night. And when it shows up at the worst possible time, Rougiet Ready is designed to help you take back control. It's a next-gen prescription treatment created to support both the brain and the body, so you can feel present, confident, and ready for when the moment matters most. Rougiet Ready combines 3 clinically proven ingredients in one mint that dissolves under your tongue so it absorbs fast. It's easy to understand why over 150,000 men have already made the switch. You connect with a board-certified doctor online, and then everything ships discreetly and directly to your door. Most men are then ready in about 15 minutes, so you can stay present, confident, and in control for when the moment is right. So if you've been thinking about taking the next step, now's the time. Head on over to Rougiette.com/lockedoncollege. Again, that's RUGIET.com/lockedoncollege to get 15% off your order for a limited time. Rougiette ready. Feel present, feel confident, feel ready. We want to actually now talk about some of the beats of the 92-93 North Carolina season. There's so many highlights along the way, and I thought you guys did a great job of pulling out so many of the key moments of that season. And I want to start with that early season matchup with Michigan in Hawaii. Pat Sullivan had talked about, hey, we were the Fab Five before the Fab Five. Obviously, Carolina loses that game. How did you all as a team plan to use that loss to Michigan to set up the drama, the tension, the height of the eventual national championship?
Well, that Michigan game that they played in Hawaii was an incredible ball game. I wish I could have given a little more time, but again, I needed to get, there's a lot of things to get to in an hour-long documentary taking on, a whole season. So, but it was such a competitive game, and it was literally a preview of the national championship game that happened in December of that season, or 92 going into the 93 season. And then, you had the Fab Five with Chris Webber, and Jimmy King was in the show, as you remember.
Yes.
He was really great too, and always just a good spirit. But yeah, that Michigan game, like I say, really set up what was going to happen. And I think also one of the things that it set up as well that I found interesting was that Dean Smith chose Donald Williams to get the ball at the money time in that game. And Donald Williams was a sophomore on that team. he was still trying to find his way and wasn't even starting all the time at that stage of the season. Henrik Rodel had his, was the starter for most of the early part of the season. Then Dean, makes great adjustments. That's one thing that he always did. And he figured out, hey, we need to get Donald out there more to score more. And, he was just phenomenal throughout the obviously the postseason run. But it kind of was foreshadowing, I think, for what he would do in that Final Four, which he scored, I think 50 points in those two games and was just lights out. And they would not have won those games without Donald's offensive, contributions. But yeah, it really set up. And it also showed the team that they could play with a team that had just played in the national championship game and lost to Duke the previous season. So, they knew, like you say, iron sharpens iron, and playing against a team like that really gave them a sense of we can play with anybody, and we know it now.
Even rewinding back to the first day of practice, as we think about that eventual Final Four at the Superdome down in Nolens, is the famous, maybe the infamous picture of the Superdome. I loved you guys detailing that in there. How did you bring that about?
Well, again, my hat's off to Dave Hanners, who was one of the assistant coaches on that team that year. Dave was an incredible resource of materials. The promo that we did, there's a really tight shot of the ring. It says the title card, we're number one. That was Dave's championship ring. He brought that in for us when we shot our open. So he was a real, just a great resource of information and probably Dean Smith's biggest advocate on the planet. And that's saying a lot because there's so many people that love that man. But Dave was a great resource. And Dave told that story, when we were sitting around, and I had heard, it's not like uncommon, but I knew. It seems like with each of these shows, and I've done 5 of these documentaries now, there's a magic moment that happens with each team where there's something that's very unique about that season. Again, it's so difficult to win a championship, and people really need to understand how hard it is. But there's always some kind of magic moment, it seems like. Back when I did the Duke show, for example, there was they lost to Virginia on the road. Coach K brings them home and makes them practice till like 2:00 in the morning. And Grant Hill ends up getting his nose broken. But it was like one of these big turning points in a season. And I think Dean Smith had this sensibility about him and George articulates it really well in the documentary. He says, if Dean Smith drew it up, it was going to happen that way. And that was sort of his way of drawing it up for the team and letting them know this is our ultimate goal. And, when you visualize something, he was a big believer in visualizing things. if you thought about things in a visual sense, it was a better chance that it could happen. You gained confidence and you believed a little more. You still got to go out and get it done, right? But nonetheless, it gave them this goal and this idea that we could win a national championship, and obviously they ultimately did.
What other beats from the stories of the season stick out to you? Whether it was the comeback against Florida State and Sam Cassell's wine and cheese comments, the victory over Cincinnati and Van Exel, the back-to-back losses, the injury to Derek Fell. What really stuck out to you along the journey?
Well, to me, the Florida State game is one of the greatest games in UNC basketball history. It was a really outstanding game, and it really did. Because Florida State was an incredible team in that time period. They were in the top 10 that season, in and out of the top 20, but they were a really strong team. And a 21-point comeback, I think, is still maybe not the greatest, but it's right up there with the biggest point differential comebacks in the second half. And they were down like 15 with 9 minutes to go, and they came back and won that game. And the way they won that game too, with George making that incredible steal from a Charlie Ward pass. He intercepted that Charlie Ward pass and took it down, and they took the lead for the first time with about a minute and a half to play. And the place, as Matt Winstrom said in the documentary, is the loudest I've ever heard the Dean Dome. And the Dean Dome can get pretty darn loud. But it was really rocking that night. Other game, when I think back, I also wanted to bring in, you need to have some obstacles to overcome it in any kind of great story. And I wanted to bring in the two losses, the loss to Wake Forest on the road and the following game against Duke on the road. So, I wanted to bring those in as well, just to let people know, hey, this wasn't like a cakewalk by any means. It may feel like that at times, when you look back at the trajectory of it all. But there was a lot of – the ACC was a gauntlet that year, as Kevin Salvadori called it. So, I needed to get those – some type of obstacle for the group to overcome. And everyone has a little lapse at some point in a long season, especially in basketball, because you're playing close to 40 games. And then the ACC tournament too, as well. Losing Derek, I can't reiterate enough that they would not have won that national championship had Derek not been able to play in that tournament. And, he was banged up all year. He was wearing hip pads in that, in some of those early NCAA tournament games. Again, you need to find some obstacles for the team to overcome. And usually they're always there, because that's just sort of the way things shake out in sports. And so those were some of the game highlights. And then obviously once you get in the NCAA tournament, I wish I had been able to highlight a little bit more of that Arkansas game when I look back.
Yeah.
That was a fantastic game. And, there's a lot in there, but I wish I could have put more, you know what I mean? But the Cincinnati game was an even better game, so you kind of have to figure it out. And you have to include the Final Four matchup with Roy, and having him in the show was fantastic as well. And then obviously the championship game was the coup de grace, or the, cherry on top, or however you want to put it. But
a couple things that stood out to me. I mean, you just mentioned the comment about if Coach Smith draws it up. Well, that is that Arkansas moment, that backdoor cut to go up one with that Donald Williams finishes. I was also laughing. A couple things about the Final Four that I've not thought about, Ed, that for some reason the documentary brought to life for me. So I wanted to say thank you. I remembered back to the 2008 Final Four where North Carolina falls to Kansas, and 2 nights later on Monday, Coach Williams wears the sweater with the Jayhawk on it and just catches all sorts of flack. He did not, unless I missed it, wear a Tar Heel sweater to the 1993 national championship game when he was the Kansas head coach. I just thought that was funny to think back on that. But the other thing from the championship game that stood out to me that I had never caught before, Ed, and there was just a flash of it in the documentary. The person that called the final actual timeout for Michigan was none other than Chris Webber himself. So wild that just before his failed timeout that cost Michigan the technical, he had been the one to use the actual last timeout, and somehow that left his brain just in the moment of all the craziness. And so I love that there was just that quick snapshot of it in the package.
Yeah. I mean, that championship team is, all you have to do is say the Webber play, and everyone remembers that championship team. And one of my goals in this documentary was to, try to not let that be the focus of the reason they won. They were in the driver's seat in that game, at the end of that game. They had 3 timeouts left. They had fouls to give, not 3 timeouts. They had timeouts left. I'm not sure how many, but they had 3 fouls to give. And again, Michigan, as George Lynch said, we were prepared for everything and they weren't. And the idea that he didn't know how many timeouts they had coming off the bench there is just, I don't know. Again, I'm not really sure how it all shook out from Michigan's point of view. Jimmy never really talked about that too much. It's a pretty sensitive topic, as you can imagine.
Sure.
But, like I said, I wanted to make sure that this team got its due. And because I really think that I know that for a fact they're the least celebrated national championship at Carolina. And I think they're one of the, most underrated national championship teams in the history of college basketball, really. So that was sort of a goal, too. I really wanted to elevate them to their rightful place because, like I say, they were the embodiment of Dean Smith's style and philosophy of playing basketball better than any other team.
Ed, I certainly think you did that. You brought the heart of that championship team. You have to include that timeout that caused the technical foul. But I think you accomplished the goal you set out. I think so often, because that's the highlight that everybody remembers, a lot of people think without that, Carolina loses. And that's just not the case. And so I thought you celebrated the fullness of that game very well. But the other thing is you just talked about the cohesion of this team. And the documentary does a great job of reminding us all of a time gone past when college basketball programs actually had the opportunity to develop rather than in this portal era where it's just, I'm building a team for this year. So what I want to ask Ed in just a second, is that ever attainable again, or is it too far gone? We'll get to that in just a second. Right after I tell you about FanDuel, you guys, Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans just like you a brand new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. It's your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app every Friday night before the action starts. It's boosts, it's bonuses, it's other surprises. That's each Friday night from 6 to 7:30 p.m., and that makes it appointment viewing NBA Happy Hour. The timing is perfect. It's right before the games, right before the weekend starts, and that's going to add extra energy to your Friday night without having to overthink it. And if you missed it last night, no worries. It's going to happen again next Friday. How about some Wooden Award odds at FanDuel? Caleb Wilson, 4th in the nation in FanDuel odds to win the Wooden Award, the best player in college basketball at plus 2,500. Go check it out. And before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, a whole lot of Friday night energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Once again, it's great to be joined today on Locked On Tar Heels by Ed Mabe, the director, the producer of We're Number One, the 1993 Tar Heels. Again, airing tonight, Saturday, after the North Carolina Wake Forest game, whenever that ends in the 8 o'clock hour Eastern time. It'll be on ACC Network. Ed, one of the beautiful things of this documentary is it creates a clear juxtaposition in my brain between the development of that Carolina team over the course of a couple of seasons, leading to this crowning moment in the championship game, versus the year-to-year rebuilds we see now in the transfer portal era. In your mind, as you interact with creating these documentaries, you talked about doing the 91-92 back-to-back Duke national champions. Is that just too far gone, or is there a hope that we can get back to an era like that where we still see those multiple years of development?
Well, I guess my first thought would probably be it's going to be difficult to get back there. It really is. Teams were just designed to, they were built to be 4-year players, and players were taught that your senior year you were a leader, and they were building towards that. And one of the things that I've noticed when I've done these, again, this is the 5th of these documentaries. The first 3 that I did were on football teams, and football teams are massive. There's 8,500 guys on a football team, right? They're all in their little groups all the time, subgroups, position coaches, such like that. But one of the things that struck me when I started, and again, even last year with the Duke show, and even more so this year with the Carolina show, is how close basketball teams are, because there's only 12 of them, and they tend to be around each other all the time, and they're it's a hard life. They're working out all the time, and they're also hanging out a lot all the time. I'm not so sure everybody does that as much anymore either. I think it's important to have some really great chemistry off the court in order to kind of build on that same chemistry on the court. So, and this Carolina team embodied that as much as any team that I've been a part of. And like I say, basketball teams are much closer because, like I say, there's only 12 to 15 of them anyway. And so they really know each other inside and out. I remember last year when we were doing the Duke show and Cooper Flagg was, the sensation that he was. And I was floating around this idea that, hey, sooner or later, somebody's just going to say, I want to stay at Duke or Carolina or the school that I'm at and try to build a championship team over a couple of years.
Yeah.
Because these days, guys, man, you make great money if you're Cooper Flagg as a sophomore. So I was thinking somebody needs to step forward and sort of set a different trend and elevate college basketball back to the heights that I think that we're really missing. You see talented players still to this day, but I just don't think you see great teams in the same sense. And so I think, it's up to someone to make that decision to stay when they're, they make $10 million in the NBA, but they can still make $2 million and stay and have some glory because, again, one of the things that I've noticed in doing these shows, these moments are most of them the peak of their athletic achievement. And these are guys who are high-end athletes, I mean, Montross played 10 or 12 years in the NBA. Lynch played a dozen years in the NBA. He may have gotten a championship with the Lakers. I don't really remember, but they all cherish this time of being in college and not being professional athletes because it's a whole different thing. I guess now it's, there's not as much difference, but there was at one time. And it'd be great to get some of that spirit back to colleges and not just have guys sign contracts according to the highest bidder. It'd be great to see a little more allegiance. Maybe I'm being too idealistic and naive, but it would be nice to see somebody buck the system and, do something different and still profit and have a great,
Sure. Yeah.
Hey, let's run it back and let's try to get a championship. Cause that, again, the Cooper Flagg team, that was a talented team. It's like, man, let's run it back. Let's see what we can do. So somebody's got to do that. I think somebody's got to step forward. And I hope to see that someday.
Well, I tell you, if you're idealistic, I'm going to join you right there in the clouds and hold on to that same hope, Ed. Inevitably, as you go throughout a project like this, there's so many hours of footage and content, and there's just no way to get it all in. What are a thing or two that just got left on the cutting room floor that grieved you to not be able to put into the show?
Well, the roundtable, we sat and shot with them for 2 hours. So there's a lot of roundtable stuff that I didn't use, a lot of just stories that were tended to be long that couldn't be edited down and just sort of didn't fit into the flow of the show in general. So you always have so much of that. But I guess if there was one thing that and again, this was until I got the Montross footage, I was going to do this. It was when Dean Smith passed, in his will, he had a clause that every varsity player that had ever played for him would receive $200. And he wanted them to take the family out to dinner with that $200. And that's one of the things too that I learned with Dean is he really liked to going out to nice restaurants, and he would take the team out to nice restaurants all the time after games. And they would be sort of upset sometimes because they'd rather take the per diem money and go buy a 6-pack of beer and celebrate on Franklin Street. But Dean would have them in these great steakhouses. And, so that was his way of sort of, reminding everyone of that time and place. And I really wish I had gotten the chance to tell that story because I had some good ideas about how I wanted to put it together as well, with each person sort of reading from his, this part in his will, the lawyer letter they all got. Just about every one of them still has the check. It's framed somewhere. I think they all said they went out and spent it, but they got like a copy of it or something. And Pat Sullivan's got it hanging up in his office. So that's one of the things that I wish I had been able to bring into the show. But again, time only allows for so much. And, this is the first show I feel like of this We're Number One series where I was able to get some emotion involved, other than just winning a championship. Obviously that's powerful as well. But this, again, that closeness of this team and their remembrance of Eric, all those things just came together really well. And that team, like I say, was just an outstanding group of people, just as Eric said, just good people, man.
And it's funny, Ed, because that's actually the closing note I want to get to is I love that this is a story about a basketball team and their journey to a championship. But in the heart of Dean Smith, this is a story about people, which is what you as a storyteller are ultimately trying to do. And so for me, the theme of legacy really came through in the documentary. And then specifically in the end, it was with three men that are no longer with us: Eric Montross, Coach Dean Smith, and Coach Bill Guthridge. The guys reminisce about those three at the end. It gets a little dusty in the room. How was that theme running through your brain as you brought it all together of the legacy of Coach Smith, Coach Gut, and Big E?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, there's so much reverence on that team for Coach Smith that was, I mean, Phil Ford, he's like a father figure to Phil Ford. Pat Sullivan followed in his footsteps into coaching. And it's just a profound influence that he had on that group, and that love that he had for the game and the love that he had for that team really kind of, it was an inevitability because of their closeness and his spirituality as well, because Coach Smith was a very religious person as well. And, he did some great things in his life off the court, we all know as well. So, that was a big theme of the show was allowing Coach Smith to be in the show, because I didn't really have a great interview with Coach Smith, as you've obviously probably noticed. There's some interview bites, but there's not like a great sit down, let's talk about the 93 season. So I needed to bring, these guys in their interviews and at the roundtable were able to kind of flesh out Dean Smith and paint this portrait of the man that they all revered so heavily. And then as far as Eric, I mean, literally, he was one of their guys that they went into battle with. There's certain things that you never forget in life. And when you achieve something that's so coveted, I think it has a profound impact on the rest of your life. And again, it's such a wonderful time period to be 21, 22 years old without a lot of cares or responsibilities other than playing basketball. And that was the end of it for most of them. Let's be honest,
Sure.
There was a few guys that played in Europe and gave it a shot, but in general, it was the highlight of their careers as athletes. And, there's nothing better than hearing those kind of stories to me as a former baseball player and, a guy who's watched sports my entire life. So, but yeah, there was a certain spiritualness to it, I think, because of Eric and because of Coach Smith and Coach Guthridge, that it just seemed like there was just something, like this is the story that needed to be told, and the way it all came together, was just incredible. And I feel very fortunate to have gotten an opportunity to tell this story of this team. And, it was, again, I've done 5 of these, and this is my favorite by far.
There you have it. We're number 1, the 1993 North Carolina Tar Heels, airing tonight, Saturday, January 10th, 8 p.m. Eastern, essentially after the North Carolina Wake Forest game is over. We'll also be live breaking down the game here on YouTube for you all. So go ahead and DVR the documentary. Come join us live. Go check out the documentary. Going to be great stuff. A real honor to get to chat with Ed Mabe today, the director, the producer of this great documentary. Sir, thank you for your work, and thank you for bringing this team back to life for us all.
Thank you so much for having me on, Isaac. It was a real pleasure.
I'm so grateful to Ed for his time, for joining me. It was so much fun to hear the stories of like both the production of this documentary and the journey of this team. I was blown away by the Eric Montross footage story. Like, so cool getting to hear all of that. So again, Ed, team, great work. Thank you for sharing it with us. We're honored by what you have created here. You guys, if you've not subscribed to the show on video and audio, do it right now so you don't miss a second of Locked on Tar Heels. We will be live again, as I said, tonight after the game, after Wake Forest, and then we'll be back with you on Monday to break it all down and look ahead to a new week as Carolina heads out to Northern California to play Cal and Stanford for the first time in ACC play on the road. If you've not joined the Locked On College Basketball Discord, the Locked On College Basketball Discord that I host is great, but the Locked On Tar Heels Discord as well. Also, our brand new Everydayer Club, that link is in the show notes. It's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. See you tonight after the game, but until then, peace.